What should the 49ers do in the draft? And more importantly, they brought in a safety on a visit. Is that somebody that's going to play alongside Huff and Tig, or is this safety brought in to replace Talanoa Hufanga? We're going to tackle those things plus more next. All right. Welcome back to Last Second Sports, where we are giving you our take down to the last second. And it's Thursday night, my night to host the big show, as Larry calls it. Got my guys, Vish and Larry, with me tonight. Vish, we'll start with you. How you doing tonight, my man?
I'm good. Exhausted from a week of work. Always ready to do this show. I see Krug has already got his infamous Coke and he's sipping it down there below. He's ready to go. So there we go.
What about you, Larry? How you doing?
On my way to diabetes, and yes, on my way to enjoying another big show with you guys. I'm really kind of fired up about one of the draft eligible players who had, because it was either today or yesterday was the Buckeyes workout in Ohio State, and it's like between Georgia, Bama, Buckeyes, LSU, it's like their pre-draft on-campus workout is significant, and I'm fired up about one of the Buckeyes maybe coming to the Niners. So we'll get into it.
Oh, I like it. I like it. Well, the first thing that we have to talk about today is Julian Blackmon came in for a visit after visiting the Buffalo Bills and leaving without a deal. And this one got interesting. So, first of all, just to set the stage, Mike Silver has been pretty spot on with a lot of the stuff he said this offseason. But one of the things that he said a couple weeks ago was there was no guarantee that Talanoa Hufanga was going to be the starter this year. And a lot of people brushed that off. But if you think about it, Talanoa Hufanga is not the most athletic guy in the world, right? He's kind of playing above his draft position already. And he's coming off of a major injury. He's going into the final year of his deal. Would the 49ers consider replacing him? Well, we might have gotten our answer today with them bringing in Julian Blackmon, who's a very good coverage safety. He's had some injuries himself, but he's only 25 years old. Larry, we'll start with you on this one. What do you think about bringing in Blackmon for a free agency visit? And is he here to play alongside Huff? And are they looking at a 3 safety look? Or do you think that they're looking to replace Huff on the fly?
Well, I just think that the 49ers are keenly aware that Huff has had a lot of injuries going back to SC. So it's not just that, oh, yeah, he's been hurt. He's hurt now, and he's coming off an ACL, and he may not be ready to start. Can you really depend on him? I almost feel like you've got to plan like you don't have him and let him surprise you if he can go. So, yeah, I think there's a real concern in 49er land at the safety position. I think safety is kind of the one spot that they're not really fortified. I mean, Jair Brown's nice, but is he a strong safety? Is he a free safety? Hufanga's a good player, but is he healthy? And, can he play coverage down the field? I just think, and then George Odom is their third safety. He's not really a from scrimmage player. He's a great special teamer. So, I and then you're looking at Taylor Hawkins and Eric Harris. I mean, guys who are more in that kind of, what do you want to call it? They're kind of in the developmental part of the game. I mean, they're more like practice squad type players. So I think they really do have a need, not just at backup safety. They have a need at start, for the starters. And a guy like Blackmon's interesting. He's got good size, good speed, and he's not just a body. He's going to get a significant amount of money wherever he goes. There's a bunch of teams interested. And I think they like the Utah safeties. And it sounds like they not only do they like Blackman, they're also interested in the Utah safety that's coming out in this draft. So, we'll see. I think that's underrated need for the 49ers is safety.
Interesting. Vish, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's a need as well. I think it's not a need because of anything to do with like whether Talanoa Hufanga is good or not. I saw that debate going on Twitter. I think that conversation is particularly independent of this one, because I think the 49ers are kind of in a funny spot at safety right now. And that's because Hufanga is in a contract year coming off of a serious injury with what Larry described as vast injury history. Now, the issue for Hufanga is, yes, he had a first team all pro season just 2 years ago, and that might have garnered him in extension talks this offseason. But that injury and him not playing as well last year kind of threw the entire situation off, because I don't know if the 49ers have delegated cap room thinking about a long-term contract for Talanoa Hufanga at this point. Just he's coming off of injury. He's already in a contract year. They have other guys who need to be paid. So that is the situation for him. And then people are interested in Jair Brown. They're intrigued by his skill set. They talk about him getting an interception in the Super Bowl, though I caution people because Tarvarius Moore also got an interception once in the Super Bowl. And so that's not an indicator of whether he's a good or bad football player. That's just a stat in the game. I'm not sure if you can 100% say that next year you can walk into the season with him as the starter at safety. There was a lot of inconsistency at the end of last year. He showed flashes of talent. Certainly, he's a young player you would want to ascend, but I don't know that you can 100% say he's your starter at safety going into next year. Hufanga's coming off of an injury. Blackman's a really good player with post versatility. He's played free safety, and he's also got versatility to play in the box. He has scheme familiarity playing for Gus Bradley and Matt Eberflus, similar schemes in different ways to the 49ers. He is a good fit. He is a good player. I don't necessarily know if the money is going to work because, like Krug said, he's a good player. A lot of people are interested in him. He's going to get starter money. But safety is somewhat of a need because the 49ers right now don't have a long-term starter set in stone beyond this next year. Hufanga is contractually not there beyond next year. And then Brown hasn't established himself, though we think he has the potential to do that.
I think, what's interesting to me is, as soon as I saw that Blackman was coming in, I tweeted out something along the lines of, Blackman's not here to be the third guy like Gibson. He's here to be a starter. He's the 49ers know this. They know that he's a starting safety. So you can look at that however you want, but he's here to take Huff's job. It's pretty clear to me that is the case. You don't bring him in to be the third guy and give you depth. He's going to get a starting job. Now, whether you want to look at that and say, okay, well, maybe Huff's the starter and Tig's the young kid, so he needs to still prove himself. Maybe that's the way that you want to look at it. But to me, if you're bringing in Blackman, that's basically saying like, hey, we're not happy with our starters. We're willing to upgrade them on the fly, whatever that looks like. And I also want to say, and Larry, you probably know this because you dig deeper into the draft than anybody, the 2025 safety class looks really deep and really good. So the 49ers theoretically could come in and say, okay, we're willing to let Huff either walk or trade him. And now we can go with Tig and Blackman. And then next year we can draft another safety to develop on the fly. And maybe, Blackman only signs a 2-year deal. You let him go after that time. And then you bring in that new safety and develop him. I just think that there's so many ways they can go with this, but it's not a foregone conclusion that Huff's going to be here and be paid, especially coming off that injury. And again, we're not talking about a guy who won on his athletic ability. So if you're taking that down a notch again, that is a little bit worrisome. And I can understand why the 49ers would be kicking the tires on bringing in somebody to compete or take his job.
I'll add something to it because I have a different angle for you on it. Because I agree with you on the long term. But I think in the short term, this is the guy to start with Hufanga. Because to me, Brown and Hufanga are actually a little bit more similar just based on how I saw Brown play last year. To me, Blackman and Brown is a better duo than Hufanga and Brown, and Blackman and Hufanga is a better duo than Hufanga and Brown. Like, I think Blackman offers something a little bit different than Hufanga and Brown. So the way I am kind of looking at this conversation is if you're able to bring Blackman in, then you look at Brown as your long-term replacement for Hufanga, and you don't have to Drake Jackson Brown either. You can give Brown some time to develop. You can give him a veteran to develop alongside of. So that's kind of how I'm looking at it. I don't know that Hufanga's job gets taken away in the short-term interim, though anytime a player doesn't have contractual security, that can happen, right? Because you're not long-term invested in him anymore. They are more long-term invested in Brown at this point. But that's kind of how I view it, because I even if Talanoa Hufanga returns to playing how he played in the first 8 games of 2022, I think that the 49ers are in a difficult spot to offer him a long-term deal. And that's why sniffing around Julian Blackman makes sense. Because whether Hufanga is back to being excellent or whether you don't think he's that good, it's going to be really hard to keep him on this team 2024 and beyond.
I think we're also kind of missing, I think, the biggest point so far, which is that if you really go and evaluate Jair Brown and Talanoa Hufanga, they're both strong safeties. I mean, they're both in the box. I mean, Jair Brown has got good production numbers. He can catch the ball down the field, but that's more along the lines of like a Tayshaun Gibson. You know, he's got a great nose for the ball. Having a great nose for the ball doesn't mean you're a great cover man. I don't see a great cover man in Jair Brown. I see a guy will hit you in the box and be a really good strong safety and has a great nose for the football. So I think they need a free safety. And if you look at Julian Blackman once upon a time was a corner. So he's got that coverage ability. I think they're most concerned about their lack of coverage ability at that safety spot. Odom's a great special team tone setter, not a free safety. Eric Harris and Taylor Hawkins is probably the closest they have to a free safety, and he's really never played there. I mean, he played corner in San Diego State's 4-2-5. He was an outside corner who played the boundary a lot. So I just think they're looking at their safeties and going, you know what? We don't know about the health of Hufanga. We don't think that any of these other guys can really be a free safety. And we're not really sure if Brown's best as a free safety either. So let's see if we can go after a free safety in Blackman and maybe get a starter. That's the way I read it.
I got another name for you guys if that's the angle then too. I mean, Quandre Diggs is still out there as a free agent. That to me would be like bringing Gibson in at the end. I don't know that Quandre Diggs is going to go for a lot of money. Quandre Diggs has been a great player for a long time. He would
First of all,
certainly.
I'm mad at you. I'm mad at you.
Were
And
you
this
going there?
it's not your fault because
Okay.
you don't know the topics ahead of time. But I was going to bring him up in a later topic,
Okay.
but this is good because we completely agree, and we might say the same guy, but it's pretty funny. Maybe we should talk about the topics beforehand so we don't overlap next time, huh?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe we shouldn't spend the first 4 minutes backstage of the show discussing Larry's son voting for Chase Sr. instead of him.
It's a bad moment.
Yeah, that might be a good start.
Kid.
Might be a good start. Okay, so here was another thing that was suggested though on Twitter was, all right, well, maybe they're bringing in Blackman because he can do what Ward did his final year and kind of be your slot corner, and they can play all 3 safeties together. Do you see a world where that happens, Vish? You don't seem too impressed with that one.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like people are underrating how good Jimmy Ward was to be able to do something like that. I don't think that's as easy a transition as people realize, especially if you're going to have to force your nickel to play some man coverage. And that was the big problem for the Niners with Isaiah Oliver, right? He couldn't run. Like Jimmy Ward was a guy the 49ers in 2018 moved to be their starting outside corner. You know how you have to be able to run to start outside at corner in the NFL? Like there's a reason guys play safety and not play corner. Like there's an athleticism threshold for that. I don't necessarily like just suggesting that you can put guys out there that way. This isn't Madden. You need a designated player to play the nickel position. I don't look at, maybe they can play some 3 safety looks, but I don't look at, it's sustainable in the NFL to sit in 3 safety looks unless you're going to do what the Cowboys do and make your linebackers safeties on nickel downs. Then that's totally different, right? If you're going to put 220-pound
J-Ron
Donovan
Kearse or whatever.
Wilson or J-Ron Kearse as your will linebacker in those situations, okay, that's very different positionally. But I don't necessarily love that, guys. How do you feel?
Go ahead, Larry.
I think the 3 safety look is personnel specific. It's like it depends who you're matching up with which week, and maybe you have a health situation, or maybe you have a certain matchup you feel like you can do. But I agree with Vish. I think that Jimmy Ward had a very special skill set, which was why I really didn't want to see him leave, because I think Jimmy Ward is the kind of guy that you could play at nickel, you could play at free safety, strong safety, you could stick him on the line of scrimmage at or a stack backer position at weak side backer.
Mm-hmm.
He could man that. He could play the nickel. He could be in a 3 safety look. I mean, if you want it, if you felt, I mean, he's just a very unique player who had the size and strength of a linebacker, but the coverage ability and quick feet of a corner. It's just a hard thing to replicate. So unless you have that special player, in some ways, I think Lenore, can do a lot of those things too, as he shows more as a hitter.
Mm-hmm.
But I think they really want another safety who can cover and going into the draft. And then if they can then I think they'll probably, they've been looking at Malik Mustafa from Wake Forest, who's a real thumper, but he also has the ability to kind of play the free safety role, and he can play the deep center, the deep third in a cover 3 type situation. So I think safety is definitely going to be a spot there looking at the rest of this offseason. I don't know, though, that anybody's going to sit in 3 safeties for any extended period of time.
Yeah, I agree. But okay, well, let's go down the path that I kind of suggested, which is they're looking to replace Huff. And let's say they bring in Blackman, and they do look to ship Huff out and maybe draft another safety, as you're suggesting, Larry. What would Huff be worth in a trade? Start with you, Larry.
Right now, you mean, as he's hurt and
Yeah.
kind of coming off a year where I would say he's probably just worth like a 4th round pick, maybe a 5th.
That's fair.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know that his value is all that too much, just because, teams are reluctant at this point to pay safeties, unless we're talking about like a Buda Baker or one of those Javon Holland, one of these guys that's like an all-pro type player. And so he's also coming off of an injury as well. It makes his market very hard to tell. But I think that the Blackman flirting and all of this ultimately comes down to less about trying to trade Hufanga, because I don't even know that if that really makes them equitably better to get a 5th or 6th at this point for Hufanga rather than let him walk for a comp pick a year later. It more goes to show that contractually, barring him just blowing them away this season and changing how they have to react to his future, I don't think he's a part of their future plans right now.
I tend to agree. Dariush guy says
the one guy who would love him is D'Amico, because I mean, just from being at practice, I mean, he was always out there early with D'Amico. D'Amico knows how he's wired, and I'm sure they're really close. Maybe D'Amico would see value in him that somebody else wouldn't. And I would say that if the Niners were going to move him, I would almost bet $1 to a dime it's to Houston.
And I'll say this about Hufanga too, because he's got an opportunity still to play out this year and change our minds. And I think the one place where he's going to be able to create value for himself is with no Dre Greenlaw next year. There is an opening for this 49ers defense on who's going to bring the energy. Who's going to be the guy that they rally behind, right? Greenlaw has kind of been their infectious energy on defense. Jimmy Ward, Krug, you talked about just the aggressive thumping, the way they would get guys to play around them with how physical they are and how aggressive they are. Hufanga has got that kind of energy. He is a guy that runs around. He's a guy that's infectious. He's a guy that's aggressive. He's a guy that gets other people to play faster because of the way he's playing. His energy helps his teammates. Maybe he's able to bounce back, have a really good season, and make himself invaluable to the 49ers because they need his intangible effect on their defense. And that would change this conversation completely a year from now.
Well, I'll give you another team too. I mean, Blackman just left the Buffalo Bills. They're clearly looking for another safety. Why not shop Hufanga to them if you get Blackman and say, hey, 4th-round pick, come get him. And
Gotta play
I
a
feel
lot of
like in that
coverage, though.
defense,
Heavy
yeah,
quarters
but
team, heavy quarters team.
that's true. But they actually do. They will play 3 safeties, and they've got 2 of them that are pretty decent already. And he could play in the box and be that 3rd safety. So I think that could get interesting for them as well. Who knows? But just might as well at least figure it out, if that's the route that you're going to go. Not that that is the route they are going to go, but maybe. Dariush guy says, package the redundant players, Debo and Huff, and get an O-line. Yeah, I think everybody is looking to get an O-line, except for maybe the 49ers. So we'll see.
You're not trading either of those guys
No,
for a
you're not.
quality O-lineman. That's the
You're
problem.
not. You're trading them for future picks, is what you're trading them for.
Right.
So.
Or you're trading them for like a mid-level offensive lineman that at best could be a okay starter. Right.
Yeah.
You're not packaging Debo Samuel and going and getting Penei Sewell.
It's funny. The more I think about the Huff thing, I don't see Huff being traded. I really don't. But
Me neither.
if he were to be traded, the team that makes sense is Houston, and maybe the guy that coming back would be Jimmy Ward. I mean, Jimmy's there as free safety. If D'Amico wants Hufanga badly, the Niners probably could they have a need for Jimmy Ward right now. Now they've got the nickel corner. Now they need that Jimmy to play the free safety spot. That was kind of the source of the tension, right? Was that he wanted to play free safety and they didn't want to play him at free safety. Well, you know what?
Yeah,
I mean, if D'Amico loves Hufanga as much as I think, maybe he'd want him, he'd flip Jimmy Ward back. Just talking, but I could see it because the Niners do. Ward was a very specific player that fit a lot of needs.
That'd be very interesting. All right. Here's another thing that happened this week was the 49ers got presumably their backup quarterback, the Pastronaut, Joshua Dobbs. And I think there was some mixed feelings on this. Larry, I know I saw your early take on it. I don't know if you've gone back and thought about it and changed. So I'll get yours in a second and see where you're at with it.
Wait, was Vish positive or negative though on his early take?
His early take was right as it happened, and he wasn't too keen on it. At least that was the early thought that I got on it. But we'll get to his take in a second. He may have changed it. I don't know. But Vish, what was your thoughts on bringing in Dobbs as the backup quarterback?
So I'll tell you what I did like about it. I liked the fact that we have seen Josh Dobbs operate in positions of utter chaos and keep his poise and start, right? Like he's gotten cut and had to start in the middle of a week on a Thursday night game. Not an easy thing for a quarterback to do. He handled that situation about as best as he probably could have. The Minnesota thing where he was playing well for Arizona, then got traded to Minnesota, then had to start immediately and was able to play well. That, not too keen. Lightly. That was pretty impressive. So at least when you're looking at a backup quarterback and you're dealing with somebody that needs to keep their poise within chaos, because you're often put into situations of chaos, he's got that quality to him. I'll tell you the other thing I like about the Josh Dobbs signing. He is getting less guaranteed money than what they paid Nate Sudfeld 2 years ago and what they paid Sam Darnold a year ago. Why was I so against them paying money to a veteran backup quarterback? Because I don't think Nate Sudfeld at any point in his NFL career has deserved $3 million guaranteed. And I know Sam Darnold's contract was even better with the Vikings, but for $3.8 million fully guaranteed for him, I also thought was a little expensive. I think Josh Dobbs provides a similar purpose to both of those two guys for only $2 million guaranteed. I also think he provides a little more talent than Brandon Allen in the case that you need to go with one of those guys because you have this catastrophic scenario where Purdy gets injured. He's a little more talented. All in all, though, even with the one-year contract, please don't make this be the reason you don't draft a quarterback. I think they still got to go draft a quarterback, and they still got to develop a guy behind him. It just puts less pressure on drafting a guy in the 6th or 7th round and asking him to make your roster. Now you have 3 quarterbacks that you can feel comfortable with in the case that you draft a guy and he's just not ready and you have to put him on your practice squad. I'm pretty indifferent about the move, but the above 2 reasons, 1, him being cheaper than both Sudfeld and Darnold, and then 2, him showing in previous instances in his career that he can keep his poise within chaos, makes him a fairly decent signing.
Larry, what are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, I liked him at Levi's against the Niners in October. He looked good. I mean, he had a 102 rating. He was, 28 of 41, 265, 2 touchdowns, no picks. He was elusive. They only sacked him one time. I thought he looked good. I thought he looked good the week before that against Dallas when they upset the Cowboys and he went 17 of 21. It was a run heavy scheme. He threw for 189, but he didn't turn it over. He had a 120 rating. But then I saw that game, unfortunately, on November 27th. I saw Vikings.
I know what game he's talking
Bears.
about.
And that game set the sport back about a decade.
The worst game national television has seen in a while.
That was one of the worst quarterbacking games I've ever seen anybody ever play. He had 4 picks. He was terrible. He was absolutely terrible. He had a 23.3 QBR. The Bears defense was not like overwhelming, but he just kept throwing it to him. He was terrible in that game. I mean, really, really, really bad. So, and then he wasn't any good against the Raiders the next week. He completed 43% of his passes. So I like it from the standpoint of I like the idea. Like when I was going through the discussion in my mind, I'm thinking Tannehill, Wentz, veteran versus rookie versus Zach Wilson, or a trade for a young guy. I kind of decided that I liked the Wentz option best. And it wasn't necessarily all because of Wentz. It was just because I want a quarterback who's not going to wet the bed, who's done it before, but also is not going to in any way interrupt. There's not going to be any kind of like, oh, he should be the guy over Brock Purdy. I think we're all kind of exhausted by that whole exercise. So I wanted a backup quarterback that could play, who was athletic, who could move, who would not contend for the number one job. And I viewed it as Wentz. And Dobbs fits a lot of those same things. And I'm not in favor of, I'd rather use that draft pick on the defense or another player on offense or whatever instead of a quarterback. Here's the thing. If you draft a quarterback and whoever it is, Michael Pratt, Joe Milton III, any of these guys, and they show you anything in the preseason, they're going to get picked off waivers at the cutdown. So I'm not in a rush to be doing personnel for the other 31 teams in the league.
Oh, I'm getting rid of Brandon Allen if that's the case. If he's good enough in preseason to make the roster where I think he's gone in waivers,
there's always that.
Brandon Allen.
But I kind of like Brandon Allen as the third guy. I think Brandon Allen's smart. I think he, from talking to him this year, he knows the system. I think he can help Brock. So I don't mind the veteran.
He's not going anywhere though, Krug. He'll still be available in December if they need to give him a call, perhaps in January, and he might even come back to camp the next year.
But I mean, like, I'd rather use that extra pick on a player than a quarterback. And to me, this is an indication that they probably will. Now, if you can always sign somebody after the draft, I mean, you could have a 4th quarterback in there. I'm just saying, I like the idea of checking boxes on your roster so that you can get to the draft and actually go build something, as opposed to, like, I really am intrigued by Joe Milton's size and arm strength. But the reality is, what do you really want out of this third quarterback or second quarterback? I want a guy that if Purdy's going to be out for 5 weeks, that this guy could start 5 games and win 4 of them, and they could maintain their playoff spot. So that's kind of what I'm looking for. And that's probably not a rookie. It's probably a veteran. And maybe it's Dobbs. He is really smart. He's underrated athletically. Supposedly he's a great guy. So I'm okay with it.
Yeah, I think the best thing about Joshua Dobbs is his name's not Zach Wilson. I think that's the best thing about Joshua Dobbs. So for me, as soon as I saw it wasn't Zach Wilson, I thought it was great. I absolutely love it. And the way that I see it, first of all, he has the coolest nickname ever. That's a win. But second of all, he really is kind of like Purdy as far as his skill sets. Now, obviously, he's not as good as Purdy, but what does Purdy bring to the table? Purdy brings good decision making. Purdy brings decisive, quick decision making. Purdy brings mobility. And I think Dobbs brings all of those things in short spurts. Now, if you give him 4, 5, 6 games in a row, the league starts to figure him out pretty quickly. And that's not where you want to be. But if you're talking in a pinch, 3, maybe 4 games, I think Dobbs can get the job done with the talent around him. And we saw him do it in Arizona. I mean, there was not a lot of talent there. And I think the most impressive thing about him is we can talk about what happened in Chicago when he was on Minnesota. That was awful. But one thing that we can't forget is that he was traded to Minnesota midweek, was not expected to see any playing time, was forced into playing time because the starter went down with an injury and then came back and won that game. I think that speaks to who he is and some of his mental fortitude. And I love that about him. So for me, as a backup, he brings everything that you want. To your point, Vish, he's inexpensive. I think that he meets the criteria as far as being able to win a few games in a pinch, which is your criteria, Larry. And really, he's very similar to Purdy's, like a poor man's Purdy, basically, but similar, which means if Purdy were to go down, let's say mid-game, you don't have to rework everything that you've worked on that week because Dobbs can probably come in and execute a lot of it in a pinch. So I like that.
Did you
Also,
see
I
Matt
would encourage.
Galloway's comment?
Who?
No, what do you say?
Oh, he said Dobbs is smart. He can have audit the payroll.
Yeah, great. Yeah, exactly. He can now be the new Parag. I will say this. I think everybody should go on ESPN site or go on YouTube and go watch the Dobbs Gruden quarterback camp episode. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. I mean, Dobbs held his own there. I mean, we've all seen that same format with so many different quarterbacks.
Yeah.
He was good in that format. He really was. So he's smart. He's athletic. He's got a great chemistry with Jawan Jennings. We know that. Ultimately, Purdy was good. Let's say, we get into the season. Purdy's going to miss 5 games. Who do you want? You want a veteran or do you want Michael Pratt? Well, I'll take a veteran. I'll take a veteran over Michael Pratt. I think Michael Pratt's pretty good. And I suspect that Pratt could do a good job. But I want a veteran. And I like Joe Milton. I think Joe Milton's a major talent. But if it comes down to do I want Josh Dobbs or Joe Milton, I want Josh Dobbs.
I agree with you, but I think in those cases, they also would have had Brandon Allen. And do I want Brandon Allen or Josh Dobbs in a game, in a pinch that they have to play 5 games? It's not even close. And it's because of the point you said, Jesse, right? Dobbs at least offers a skill set that you feel talent-wise you're not totally out of it. Brandon Allen offers a little bit more closer to that Nick Mullins physical talent. And that's where you feel like no matter what, you're always going to leave a little bit wanting because the quarterback just doesn't have enough. Jeez. Live Insurance is wanting Larry to say some things tonight.
What's that?
I went and watched Penix. I told you I would. I can't delivered on my promise. I did go watch Penix, so there's that.
I do love Penix. I believe. I'll say this. I still believe in Trey Lance. I still believe in Zach Wilson. I still believe in some of these quarterbacks that aren't good right now. Because I know my NFL history, and I know history's littered with guys who weren't good at 24 who figured it out. And 1 or 2 of these guys, between Fields and Lance and Wilson, and name all the struggling quarterbacks in their first half of their 20s, a couple of those guys are going to figure it out, and it's just a matter of who's it going to be.
Heck
So
yeah, Kenny Pickett, let's go.
Yeah, maybe Kenny Pickett.
Kenny Pickett. I think. I don't necessarily disagree that the NFL is littered with guys that weren't good early on and then came across. I don't know if the NFL is littered with guys, though, that did get 3 years of playing time for the most part, weren't good, and then became good. I think it really starts and ends with Alex Smith that I can think of.
Yeah.
Vinny Testaverde got a lot of playing time, and he was a very good quarterback with Baltimore and the Jets later in his career, for sure. So he stands out to me. But like Zach Wilson's probably a bust. Trey Lance is probably a bust. Justin Fields probably a bust. Just not officially. You know what I mean? In my mind. And I've seen, to me, when you want it bad enough, and you got a body to play, you'll figure it out.
Well,
You'll figure it out.
Well, the way I look at it is I think their careers aren't officially bust, but in the case of Mac Jones, Justin Fields, Trey Lance, they're bust for their teams
Zach Wilson.
because they got
Yeah.
rid of, in Zach Wilson's case, not yet, because he's still officially rostered on the Jets pretty much because they're like trying to get rid of him, but technically they haven't gotten rid of him while he's still on his rookie contract yet. So there's that technicality. But the other ones at this point, when you get rid of a quarterback you draft in the top 15 picks in his rookie contract, you trade him, that's a bust. There's no other way to slice it. And in Zach Wilson's case, it'll be officially a bust once he gets traded in a week or two or gets cut.
But go study your Hall of Famers, and you'll find Dan Fouts, Roger Staubach, Terry Bradshaw, Sonny Jurgensen, Kurt Warner, Steve Young, and others. And none of those guys were any good until they were like 27. Steve wasn't really any good until he was like 31. Sometimes it's situational. The one thing I will say,
that's also playing quarterback in the 1970s and 80s versus playing quarterback in
Rich Gannon's another one. But the one reason I'm okay with them, going in a different direction is they don't necessarily need at this point, somebody else who's a viable starter. You know what I mean? That might actually be a negative at this point. They've got their guy. I think we all know they've got their guy. So it's like, I like Fields. I think Fields has got talent. I really do. But if Fields played well in 5 games and then you got half the fan base going Fields, that's not good. And same with Lance, same with Zach, same with any young quarterback that hasn't done it yet that has a lot of talent. So Dobbs is fine. I'm fine with Dobbs because it's a young, athletic, veteran, smart guy who's not going to disrupt their rhythm. He's just going to be a backup.
Yeah, and nobody, like, to your point, nobody's going to be like screaming from the rooftops to play Dobbs over Purdy if he comes in and plays well for 3 games. Right?
Mm-hmm.
This is not going to happen. So,
like
that does matter. It does matter.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I mean, come on, I bet you anything. Shanahan still believes in Zach. Still has some like for Zach Wilson, but Zach Wilson's in his own category because he didn't just not play well. He also, didn't respond as a leader the way the quarterback's got to lead the room. And he's got a real question of whether he can lead a room of men at this point. That's a very real question.
And I think the other thing is the Niners don't need a guy who's confident that they need to sit and rebuild, right? Because they don't have time for that. They already have their quarterback. He's confident. They need a veteran who can shore up things and operate in chaos in the case that their quarterback has a catastrophic situation where they have to deal with that. And that's not Zach Wilson. To me, Zach Wilson, Mac Jones, a lot of these guys, they need to go to a place where they can rebuild and sit. They can rebuild themselves up. They don't believe in themselves right now. And I think that's a part of why their quarterback play has been so bad. Zach Wilson's confidence looks completely shot. I mean, the guy had the best game of his career after refusing to start and being coerced by Aaron Rodgers to start. And then he played the best game of his career versus Houston. There's a lot of things not right with that situation. The 49ers don't need to get into that business. Zach Wilson, perhaps, Mac Jones, perhaps, Trey Lance, perhaps, Justin Fields, perhaps, can be turned into valuable assets later down the road. But I think that there's a lot of rebuilding that you need to do with those guys as well. And there's a lot of work that you need to do. And I don't think the 49ers need to be invested there. Because like you said, Krueger, and like Jesse said, they need a proper backup because they already have their starter. And he's clearly their starter.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we teased this one unintentionally earlier. So I'm going to have to come up with another guy. But initially, my guy was going to be Quandre Diggs.
I asked for your opinion on it, so you could still take it.
No, it's fine. I'll come up with somebody different on the fly. But initially, I was going to say Quandre Diggs here because if they didn't get Blackman, I think he is the perfect guy. You're looking for a guy that will sign maybe a 1-year deal and try to prove himself. He knows this system. I don't think he's lost anything athletically. And I think he would be the perfect guy if you're going to carry 3 safeties to pair with Tig and Hufanga. Now, if they're looking to replace Huff, that's a whole different thing. I wouldn't go the Diggs route, but I think Diggs for a 1-year deal would be so perfect with these two younger guys here. And also, sounds like he's pretty pissed at the way things ended in Seattle, even with the fan base there. It feels like he was disrespected. Why not bring him in a la Richard Sherman and see what he's got left? And I think it would be a great pairing. That being said, I will come up with somebody different. But Larry, let's start with you on this one. Is there anybody, and maybe the answer is nobody for you. Maybe you want to, you don't care. There's nobody else that you're looking at, but is there anybody in free agency that is left that you think, all right, we can fit him under the salary cap. It's not going to take a big deal. Maybe a 1-year guy to just kind of help them go win. Is there anybody that comes to mind for you?
I'm gonna have to gander at the list here, which I'm looking at right now.
I got one more for you if you don't want.
I'll give you one. I'll give you
Okay,
one that I really like. I like Xavier Howard. To me, the Niners need a number one corner. That's a need. Like I think Mooney's a great number two, and I think Lenore is a really nice slot. But after watching what the Chiefs corners were able to do in the Super Bowl, I'm more interested in a Surtain trade involving picks than I've been at any point. And if you don't want to go that route, then I would go the route of Xavier Howard, who's he's only 30. He's a productive interceptor. He absolutely still walks on the field with the swagger of a number one corner. Now, a lot of people say, how about Tre'Davious White? Well, he was a number one corner as well, but I don't think he still plays anywhere close to that anymore. So I'd be interested in Xavier Howard. I've seen Xavier Howard do his thing, and I'm really impressed by his instincts, his ability. To me, they don't have that player. You can never have enough corners. That's the guy I'd go after.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm going in a completely different situation. I'm thinking less big name and thinking like who's a value signing I still see available in free agency. And I'm going to go with the name that's a little unconventional. He didn't have a great season last year, but this to me is just simply because I liked him before the draft, and that's Paris Campbell. I liked Paris Campbell when he came out of Ohio State.
He signed today.
He signed? Who did he sign with?
With the Eagles.
Okay, well, that sucks. I was about to say I like Paris Campbell as a kick returner, possibly reviving his career in this scheme, being used as a Deebo Samuel type. He's not Deebo Samuel, but he has the ability to reverses, all of that stuff. That's who he was at Ohio State with Dwayne Haskins. Dang, well, I guess I'm going to go back to Quandre Diggs, Jesse. Sorry, that answer's off the table.
Well, if Vish, his guy's gone, I'll say this. Another guy that I know George Kittle is really close with, and I really like him, is the tight end that was in Green Bay that went to Chicago.
Robert
Tonyan. Yeah, I think Tonyan is out there. He's available. The Niners need a real tight end here. I mean, I don't know if
they too, right?
Yeah, I think so. But I mean, like, they have no Dwelly. He's gone. They lost Werner. Kittle gets hurt a lot. The other guys, I don't know if Cam Latu can play dead. And we didn't see Braden Willis do anything. So, I mean, these guys made no impact. I mean, obviously Latu was hurt, but I'd be interested in Robert Tonyan. He's only 29. That's still a relatively young player. I kind of like him. I also kind of like Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who's, only 24. And I just feel like it hasn't worked out for Clyde Edwards-Helaire, but he's hardly the worst running back I've ever seen. He still has some good things that he does. That would be more of a depth piece because they really don't have a need there. But Tonyan makes sense to me.
I got one for you. In the same vein as kind of where you were going a little bit, Vish. Now, this player was a Pro Bowler as a returner a couple years ago, was signed by Cleveland to be just that, and unfortunately got the injury bug 2 years in a row. Talk about somebody that's cheap. Jakeem Grant And kick the tires on him, right? Bring him in as a camp body. Maybe he's not good enough to make the team. Maybe he's completely lost it. Or maybe with these kickoff rules, he's exactly what you need and he can regain his career on the fly. And now all of a sudden you've got a legit kick and punt returner that is extremely explosive, has been a Pro Bowler in this position. Why not? Why not bring somebody in? We've been talking about it for years, how this has been something that is missing from the special teams. Really, have we had a consistent guy or a really good guy since Ted Ginn? I don't think we have. Maybe Grant can be that answer.
I love that idea too. It's right around the Paris Campbell thing, because the other thing I was thinking about is, how do you add explosiveness to this offense in the case that Debo isn't there, right? Because that's been a situation we've talked about. When Debo is hurt, this offense is lacking some juice and lacking some explosion. And so that's what I was thinking along the lines of Paris Campbell. Obviously, he's also injury prone. Jakeem Grant, same thing. Jesse, I could totally see him being somebody, okay, Debo's out. We can give that guy a couple of seed sweeps in a game and he might go 70. We can give that guy a couple of screens in the game and he might go 70. Obviously, he's not Debo, but it would be nice to have a better approximation of that explosion versus Ray, who is good with the ball in his hands, but he's not that explosive, not like a Debo or a Paris Campbell or a Jakeem Grant. And yeah, live insurance, that's not Ronnie Bell's cup of tea.
I'll give you another name along those same lines, Jamal Agnew. Jamal Agnew's only 28. He's a good return guy. Just looking at the free agent list of who's out there, if they do decide they want to move a receiver, man, there are some good receivers still available. I mean, give you a little handful of 4 or 5 guys that are still available. Michael Thomas, DJ Chark, Josh Reynolds from Detroit, he's still available. LaVisca Chenault, Chase Claypool, and Jalen Guyton, who was with with the Chargers. He's kind of interesting. There's one more name on here. And I'm a big fan of this guy. Now, you would have to be moving another receiver to make room for this guy, but I thought Isaiah Hodgins is a pretty good football player. I mean, you're talking about a kid who's from Berean High School here in Walnut Creek. He's only 25. He's got great size. And we're talking about 6'4", 6'5", tremendous ball skills. Now, he's not necessarily what you're looking for if you're the Niners right now, because they're looking for a complimentary speed guy, and they already have all the intermediate guys. But Isaiah Hodgins is a good receiver. I mean, I would gladly take Isaiah Hodgins as a backup receiver on any team that I.
He was with the Giants, right?
Yeah.
He led them in receiving a couple years ago.
Yeah, and he was big in the playoffs.
And
he's got sticky hands. He's big. I mean, we're talking about 6'4", 6'5". He might even be.
He's like a nice Jennings replacement, right? But he's with Jennings.
Or maybe even if you can't find the tight end. I mean, I'd rather have Isaiah Hodgins try to play tight end than Braden Willis. Braden Willis is built like a fullback. Braden Willis is short and squatty. Isaiah Hodgins is 6'4", 6'5", with great ball skills. And
play in line?
No, but I mean, neither can Braden Willis, obviously. I'm saying? I don't, he's not an ideal fit, but it would be like having a receiver that you used as a tight end, and every time you utilized him, you flexed him out. But I mean, Hodgins I definitely have some interest there, because he's not old, and he was damn good at Oregon State. And he's shown in the NFL that he's got ball skills. You got to catch the ball.
I always saw Willis when they drafted him anyways. I saw him as the future Juice replacement, but I don't know that that's going to happen either. So, but that's kind of where I went, because he is more squatty, like you said. I feel like that's a proper word.
No, it is. It was just so funny to see it used as an adjective that way, like 3 minutes apart by 2 different people.
Everton says thoughts on TJ Tampa. I like TJ Tampa a lot, but I also am not necessarily willing to go corner that early. I think there's a lot of value in round 3 and 4 for corners. you're the resident expert on the draft, Larry. What are your thoughts on TJ Tampa?
I love TJ Tampa. I mean, TJ Tampa is just a ridiculous. He's just a ridiculous hitter. I mean, if you watch him, he loves to hit. And I think the 49ers, whether it be Max Melton from Rutgers or TJ Tampa from Iowa State, I think, that's the guy they need on the corner. He's 6 feet, really powerful player. I mean, TJ Tampa's a thumper, man. You want somebody who's going to step up on the line of scrimmage and set the edge and hit. He's going to do it. I mean, he really is. I mean, he was, he's a St. Petersburg, Florida kid. There's a lot of great players that come out of Florida, and he was one of them. And then if you watched him this year, I mean, this guy's got the recovery speed that you want. He's long. He's an athletic cover guy, very fluid and quick twitch. He's got the quick feet, and then he's really smart. Like if you watch him play, he can recognize a screen pass and just come flying. I mean, just absolutely come flying up the field. So I really like him. You can question the long speed, which is why I don't know that I would want to take him at the end of the first round.
Yeah.
He might be more of like a second or third round pick. But outside of questionable long speed and a little bit of just he's a little reckless, let's say, he's what you're looking for, man. This guy will step up and starch you. He reminds me a lot of Emmanuel Mosley. Big guy, he's really super competitive at the catch point. He's got great ball skills, but then this guy will step into the run game and smack you. So
I like it.
I like him.
I obviously am aware of where he's projected. I haven't watched him individually, but when you look at his physical frame and all of that, obviously the one question with corners that are big and especially that are linearly built, because he's a long guy that's also big, is can they transition and can they run? And so, like, I'm going to watch him eventually. I'm still watching quarterbacks, but I would love to see. That would be the question. And if you're talking about a corner, definitely in the first round, Krug, I don't know how you feel about this personnel-wise, but to me, if we're talking first round corner, he has to be elite in terms of movement ability, because after you get past the first round, when you're talking about movement skills for a corner, it becomes a little bit more saturated. When you're talking about like the first round guys like a Pat Surtain or a Jalen Ramsey, these guys, Darrelle Revis, these guys move different. That's why they're so excellent at their position. And so I'm not sure yet with TJ Tampa. I love everything you described. When I go watch him, that would be what I would be thinking on if you're talking him at 31, is does he move like a first round corner?
He's a really good player, but to me, Max Melton. If you're going to pick a corner at the end of round one, go with Melton. Why? Because Melton is a true thumper in the run game. He's really, really smart, and he ran like 4.33 or something like that at Indy. So I mean, I think most people had like a second or third round grade on Max Melton, but now that he ran in the low 4.3s, I think he could sneak into the back of round one. I mean, Max Melton would be like, if the Niners wanted Max Melton and they're at 31, they could probably trade back 5 or 6 spots and then just take him right there. But to me, he is my favorite corner in the draft. And I can understand why Lynch and the Niners are so interested in Mustafa at safety and Melton at corner, because Lynch himself was just the ultimate hitter. And these guys are physical. I mean, really physical. But this is also
Melton is the Rutgers corner, right?
Yeah. I mean, Melton is just absolutely will step it. That's Bo Melton's brother, by the way.
Oh, actually?
Yeah. That's
like Bo Melton, Packers receiver.
Yeah. Who started in Seattle this year and wound up in Green Bay. This is his brother. And this guy is just a tremendous player. But it's also a really good draft for corners. And when I went through and looked at the list, I mean, there's 15 good corners that you could get later in the draft too, but none of them hit like Melton and none of them run like Melton.
Yeah, he's I like Tampa. I agree with pretty much everything that you said, but I just I don't know. I don't know if there's a surefire corner at the end of round one. Now, Melton, maybe I like Melton a little bit more, but I don't know. I don't know if I feel like I said, to me, I really find a lot of good players at the corner position in round 3. I think this is a deep corner draft for guys that aren't going to go necessarily round 1, but round 3 and 4, I think you can get some really sweet players there. So that's where I would look to go corner personally.
I mean, there's Nate Wiggins from Clemson, but he's super skinny. I mean, he was like I think he was like 170 pounds.
He ran 4.2 though, didn't he?
He ran incredible, and then at his pro day, he had put on some weight. But I mean, you look at that frame, and you're like, oh my god, this kid's never going to stay healthy. Then there's Kool-Aid McKinstry, who doesn't run particularly well, but he ran okay.
And he's got
the
Jones
Pro
fracture.
Day.
Right.
He's got the Jones fracture, and with the Jones fracture, he still ran a decent time, and he's a great football player. I mean, Kool-Aid McKinstry is a very, very good player. But then it's
Arnold.
Then it's Kamari Lassiter from Georgia, another guy.
Yeah.
If you watch the film and you look at his movement, you're like, oh yeah, this guy's awesome. But then when you saw the 40 time, he ran a very slow, really slow 40 time. So so then you kind of question yourself.
He ran 4.6, right?
Yeah, I mean a 4.6 corner, you typically can't take that guy that high. So it's kind of it's a beauty in the eye of the beholder situation, but there are a lot of good players down the board, like DJ James from Auburn. I was at the Cal Auburn game, and he made the game-winning interception. He's a tremendous corner. Renardo Green from Florida State, really good corner. Mikey Sainristil, you guys saw him make the interception in the national championship game that sealed the win for Michigan. He's only 5'10", but he's a really good football player. He's one of the captains of that team. And there's others. Cam Hart from Notre Dame's a big corner. The Niners brought in Chow Smith-Wade from Wazoo, who's kind of smallish, but huge playmaker. They showed a lot of interest in Elijah Jones from BC. There's just a bunch of guys, and there's even more beyond that. So,
Cam Hart, Tyree Jackson.
Yeah, I mean, Willie Drew from Virginia State
in the chat. Leon Sandcastle in particular, former combine great.
Jarvis Brownlee played at Florida State, transferred to Louisville. So there's a bunch of guys.
Josh Newton. All right, enough geeking out. Although we're going to talk a little bit more draft, but we're going to do it in a little bit of a different way. And Larry, this comes from you. So I don't know. I'm sure you've talked about it on your shows this week, but you and I had text you last Thursday, maybe before the show, or maybe we were talking backstage, and I said, hey, can't really say exactly what's going to happen. I was talking about the Donald retirement, but I said, I can't really say exactly what's going to happen, but there's a big move that's going to shake up the NFC West in the next 24 hours or so. And at that time, you said you got excited and you're like, are we trading for Surtain? I was like, no, that's not it. But it's just as big, I guess. But ultimately, I think Surtain is a guy that you've really been pounding the table for, even since last year's trade deadline, if I remember correctly. So the question now becomes, I mean, the only way that you're going to get Surtain is by trading some major draft capital at this point. And the 49ers are in a win now mode. So I understand that strategy a little bit, but I also understand that they're trying to build towards the future, and the draft picks in this draft can be very crucial in helping out with that. So I think I know where you stand. So Vish, I'll start with you, and then we'll go to Larry, and I think we can have some good back and forth here. But Vish, whether it's Surtain or anybody that your heart desires, do you believe that the 49ers should trade some major capital to go get one more big star, or would you prefer that they hang on to a majority of especially their early draft picks, and just ride it out through the draft? What would you like to see happen?
Yeah, I would like them to keep accumulating depth, because right now they have all their stars basically quota filled up, and they got to pay another one in Brandon Ayuk. I don't know that adding a Pat Surtain contract, even though I don't know how feasible that trade even is, because when you're talking about Pat Surtain, they might have to move even one or two of those stars we're talking about to acquire a player like that. So I don't even know how feasible that is. But when you're talking like that, I don't know that the Niners need to add that right now. They have their contracts. They have a lot of long-term contracts that are about to kick in. Jesse, you talk about this all the time. The futures on their cap. They have a lot of backloaded deals that are about to really hit in terms of taking up cap percentage. Of course, the cap is constantly increasing, but you still have to pay that money at some point, and they're about to pay that money to a few different guys. They have Brock Purdy coming up. To me, it makes more sense. You have 11 picks to be able to spread apart and add depth to this roster and take your opportunities at different spots. Of course, in the case that you can get a guy like Patrick Surtain, this entire conversation changes because we're talking about a Hall of Fame talent at corner, frankly. That's what he is. He's a Hall of Fame talent. Whether his career turns out that way, he's that talented enough to make to then receive that kind of accolades at the end of it. So that does change the conversation. I just don't think it's feasible. And I don't know that there's a lot of star players other than Surtain that really move the needle in terms of moving monumental assets. But Surtain, even though that wouldn't be something I want them to go, Surtain would be the kind of player that changes this entire conversation because he's better than just, okay, I'm trading for a good player. You're getting a 24-year-old franchise best corner in the NFL, and that's a very valuable commodity to have.
Okay, Larry, where are you at with this whole thing?
Well, I don't like the idea of trading draft choices for veterans as a rule. As a rule, I really don't like it because I just think you always need more depth, more depth, more depth, more depth. And when you sell out for individuals, it just puts an awful lot of pressure on those individuals to stay healthy. But in this scenario, to me, there's a right and wrong time to trade for a veteran. And the right time is when you're in your Super Bowl window and you're desperate. And the wrong time is the rest of the time. And I think the 49ers are in their Super Bowl window and somewhat desperate. I mean, Ambry Thomas is a major question mark / liability. They don't believe in Womack. They obviously don't believe in Luter. They're too deep at corner in an era where you need 3 corners, and you just got beat by L'Jarius Sneed and that nickel corner. McDuffie was awesome. Those guys were tremendous. And I think if you're going to learn from that experience, I mean, learn from the Rams. The Rams went and got Ramsey, and they traded for the veteran. They won the Super Bowl, and now they got down the road and they moved off of Ramsey. But I mean, Surtain is a difference maker. Difference makers on the perimeter are worth it. And I think now with the way they've attacked free agency, I mean, where are the needs? How many real needs do the Niners have? I mean, realistically, let's just quickly go down the roster. They have 3 quarterbacks. They don't necessarily need a quarterback. They've got 5 running backs and a fullback. They don't necessarily need a running back. They have a bunch of receivers. They don't necessarily need a receiver. They could use a tight end and an offensive lineman or 2 on offense. So let's say they have 3 needs. Let's say they have tackle, guard, and tight end.
But you're talking about needs only for this year. And that's where I think if you're talking about a guy like Surtain, you're also giving him money long term that's going to add to additional needs. So they don't have those needs this year. But Brandon Ayuk, if he's not re-signed, all of a sudden wide receiver is a need because Deebo Samuel's a year also away then going into next year of being away from getting a new contract, right? Running back is not a need today,
I'm saying you got 10 picks, and you probably are going to have a hard time drafting 10 guys that can make your roster. You got a really deep defensive line. You went and signed 2 veteran linebackers, and you got Greenlaw coming back. So you're pretty stacked at linebacker, even though I would love to see them draft another one. We already kind of talked about how they have a need at safety. So to me, it's like you got a couple needs on offense. You got a couple needs on defense. On defense, what do you really need? Well, you need Surtain. You need a number 1 corner that sits Ambry Thomas's butt on the bench. And Surtain to me makes sense in this scenario. Now, what's it going to take? I would say it's going to take a first, a second, and a third, or it's going to take, and it may be over 2 drafts. Like maybe you could trade your second and your third this year and a conditional pick next year that's a 2 that can become a 1 if you win the Super Bowl or something along those lines. But I think 2 2s and a 3 is probably going to be the price tag, or possibly a 1, a 2, and a 3 with the 1 being deferred. I think that could be the price tag. And I think that 49ers are in a unique position where they can afford to pay that right now. And I think I can make a compelling argument that they should. And also, I kind of look at this year and I say, well, if you could get Surtain out of this draft and rebuild your offensive line, would you consider that a slam dunk draft? And I kind of think I would. And with all the picks they have, they could. I like some of the tackles that are going to be there in the 3rd and 4th round. Garrett Greenfield from South Dakota State, Javon Foster from Missouri. Those guys are going to be there in the 3rd or 4th round. You might be able to go Zach Frazier at 31, trade your 2 and 3 for Surtain, and in the 4th round, take Greenfield and Foster back to back. Now you've got Zach Frazier, who's just I don't know if you've seen this West Virginia center, but he's just a ridiculous dominating force at center. He looks like the kind of guy that he's going to walk in the room and they're going to say, "Hey, Jake, beat it." You know what I mean? He looks like the kind of guy that would start day one. But if you could get a dominating center and a couple tackles that you like and Surtain out of this deal, out of this draft, I should say, I think they're uniquely positioned. But I will say this. I do sway on this day after day because there are a lot of defensive linemen that I really think are special in this draft, and I wouldn't mind picking off a couple of them, and maybe Surtain's not the way to go. And I do like, as I named for you guys, the corner market on day 3. I think there's 4 or 5 or 6 really decent guys that can make the roster, but they're not Surtain. They're not number 1 corners. So
where are we getting the 2 2s and a 3 price for Surtain from?
I'm just saying, I think a 1, a 2, and a 3 is probably what it's going to take. But maybe you could go 2, 3 this year, 1 next year, or maybe you could go 2, 3 this year and a conditional pick that it could be a 2 that could be a 1 next year. I mean, I look at Denver and they don't have a quarterback. They're clearly in a rebuild. They need to move this player for picks. The 49ers are have picks. They've gone through the last couple of years with no number 1s because of Trey Lance. I think the Niners, if the price tag is a 1 next year, a 2 this year, and a 3 this year, I can make that payment. I can make that trade because I feel good enough about the compensatory picks, the depth, and I think Surtain's that special. I mean, Surtain to me is better than Snead. I mean, they've talked about maybe a second for Snead. Well, first of all, that's never going to happen because Kansas City, Brett Veach is never going to trade Snead to the only team that could probably beat them in the Super Bowl. So the Niners are not getting Snead, no matter, even if Snead goes for a 2. But they could maybe get Surtain. Surtain's a perfect player. He's a player in his prime who plays in the other conference for a team that doesn't have a quarterback, that's in the biggest rebuild there is, that needs picks badly. And the Niners have a bunch of picks and comp picks coming. So I just think most years I would never entertain it. This year, I think I definitely would.
I'm sorry. I'm having a tough time finding out how you trade for Pat Surtain without giving up 2 1s. That's what I'm having a tough time.
I mean, I've never seen that in print. I've seen a 1, a 2, and a 3 in print. That's all.
But I haven't seen any reporting on Patrick Surtain necessarily being moved. It's been speculated, but it hasn't been like, oh, the Broncos are going to move their best player either if you're looking for
no, but
and I've seen this deal happen in 2020, 21 with the best corner in the NFL at the time in Jalen Ramsey, and that was 2 1s and a 4.
Yeah,
this is that deal. This is that guy. This is Jalen Ramsey again. 5 years.
Well, I mean, we can. I mean, we don't know what the price tag is. If the price tag is a 1, a 2, and a 3, I think I could do that deal. That's what I'm saying.
I'm just saying, like a week ago, we were talking in this show about Brandon Ayuk being moved for the 17th pick, another pick, and another player, and we're talking 2 2s and a 3 for Pat Surtain. Like, I don't think that's really making sense to me. Like, to me, Patrick Surtain, if Brandon Ayuk is worth the 17th
Brandon Ayuk's
Patrick
not
Surtain is worth 2 top 15.
Brandon Ayuk's not getting. Brandon Ayuk's value is maybe the 17th pick, anywhere from 17 to 22. He's not worth a player in a first round, and he's not worth those.
You got to remember one factor that changes things, And that is that if you're a team that needs Brandon Ayuk, your shit's out in the street and you're going to be fired. And that's why you want Brandon Ayuk. Otherwise, why would you want Brandon Ayuk? There might be 3 receivers in this draft in the second round that are better than Brandon Ayuk, but it takes time to develop wide receivers. And if you're Mike Tomlin hasn't won a playoff game in a while. Suddenly Mike Tomlin is acting kind of, I mean, if Mike Tomlin was super secure, why wouldn't he just trade for Justin Fields? Instead, he's got Fields and Russell. Why? Because I think there's some people in Pittsburgh going, you know what? It's time for us to win a playoff game. And I think there's a little pressure on him to win in the playoffs. And that's why when I see, and Trent Baalke, for example, all this talk about Trent Baalke had to fire all of his defensive coaches this year as the fall guy for this year. His ass is out next year and he knows it. So why are they interested in Ayuk? Because a rookie receiver, even if he's awesome, if he's not awesome till year 2, it might be drafting for somebody else. So the veteran receiver, I think, does have a little bit more value because the rookie receiver almost always takes time to develop.
Would you include Ayuk in this deal? Because then, to me, the variables change if you're talking about trying to use Ayuk as a piece to trade for Pat Surtain.
I don't like the idea of moving Ayuk. I mean, to me, that's one step forward and one step back. I'm not really sure, but I'd be open-minded. Why? Because of what I just said. Because every year it seems like the receiver market's deeper. There's good receivers that are still on the market in the free agent market right now. And they're loaded at receiver. And I mean, reality. I mean, let's get reality here. I mean, the 49ers are a run-first football team. Everybody knows that. They have $62 million most likely going to be tied up in receivers if they go forward with an extension for Ayuk and don't trade Debo and don't trade Jawan. That's a shit ton of money devoted to wide receivers.
It's by a wide margin more than any team.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, that is so much tied up in wide receivers, and it's a commodity that's out there. I mean, I love Brandon Ayuk, but I couldn't tell you for sure that the LSU kids are not better than Brandon Ayuk long term. Or I can't tell you for sure that, Xavier Legette is not going to be as good as Brandon Ayuk. I mean, there's a lot of good receivers. Let's just say that. I don't know which ones are going to be good or which ones are going to bust, which is why the draft is hard to handicap receiver-wise. But, man, there's going to be some damn good receivers that don't go in the first round long-term in this draft. So, yeah, I guess I would consider it. I'm not in a rush to move Ayuk, though. I think Ayuk's pretty special.
I want to address this one too, because, Frank does bring up a good point, but I think that the past is a good predictor of the future. And we've seen good receivers get traded within the last couple of years, and we know what the asking price was and what eventually happened. And we've seen elite corners get traded. So we don't know, while we don't know exactly what the value is, we know probably about 90% of basically what they're worth in a trade. We're very, very close with an educated guess on that one, because the league has told us what their value is.
When it comes to Pat Surtain, we're talking about the best corner in football. He's 24 years old. He's been productive from day one. He has NFL legacy, which means something to, front office people and scouts like Larry. They love the NFL bloodline. His dad was a hell of a player. So, he checks every box. It's hard to draft Pat Surtain. Not every draft in the top 10 picks has a corner like Pat Surtain. He's that kind of player. So if we're talking about business for him, like Jesse said, we do have an indication of where those highest worth players go. And he's talking about what did I think Fields is worth? I don't know where the 20th to 32nd best quarterback, ranging on whoever you ask, goes in the NFL. I do know what the top 2 or 3 corners in the NFL go for in football. And every person you will ask will say Patrick Surtain is in that conversation. Some people will say Justin Fields is the 15th best quarterback, and some people will say he's the 25th best quarterback. There's a complete difference in the variance of how the players are being viewed.
Yeah.
And there's also, a guy like Surtain is so good that you could openly question is he available at all? But if you go back to last year's trade deadline, if you believe the talk in and around the deadline, the Eagles made an offer, the Niners made an offer, and the Denver was listening to offers. So we'll see. We'll see. I mean, it's a little bit of a pipe dream, but the Niners this year, I wouldn't do this most years, but the Niners this year have filled enough of their needs in free agency, and they have a desperation need. I mean, Ambry Thomas is literally going to be picked on routinely until they get somebody better. So this is the 1 year I would consider making the big move for Surtain if I could get it, if I could get my price, if I could make it work. There's a lot of ifs there, but if they were willing to move him and if you could make a reasonable deal, yeah, I think he, in very many ways, if you say what's the Niners want to win the Super Bowl next year. What do they need? They need a number one corner. They need these guys that they're redone D-line to play ball, and they probably need to draft, some offensive linemen that either get Brendel and McKivitz and whoever's at right guard to play better or step in for those guys, because the right side of that line was just not good.
I love PS2, but I just think this draft and next draft are so crucial to get that depth going forward. And also on that note, Brandon Ayuk is so crucial to re-sign, because when I look at things, yes, Brandon Ayuk is their most tradable asset. Yes, putting 60 plus million into your receiving room makes no sense. But Brock Purdy is ultimately going to likely be signed to a big deal, which means they think he's the franchise quarterback. And I think through this draft and next draft, they have to find a way to protect him and keep his number one weapon for years to come, because guys like Kittle, who are getting paid now, guys like Debo, who are getting paid, Trent Williams, these guys, these all-pro players are CMC. They're not going to be here in 3 seasons. Ayuk presumably will be and still be producing at a high level because he's much younger than them and he's ascending unlike all of them. So for me, I think keeping Ayuk is crucial. I think building around him with the offensive line long-term is crucial. And I think keeping your quarterback upright and respirating is a lot more important than getting a number one corner, because it's not just about this year. If you go all in on this year and they don't win for whatever reason, I think they're in a world of hurt for long-term, and people are going to be really, really pissed in 2 years as to why Brock Purdy can't hold up and stay healthy, because they decided to forfeit all their picks and not draft guys to protect him. So
I will say this, though, if you know your Niner history, the Niners have never won a Super Bowl without a dominant number one corner. They won in 81. They had Eric Wright. They won in 84. Eric Wright was absolutely at the top of his game. They won in 88 and 89. They had Don Griffin and Tim McKyer playing at a really high level. They won in 94 with Dion and Eric Davis. And then you look at this division. The Rams have Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. I mean, you better be able to cover these guys. I look at Jameson Williams and what he did against the Niners in that playoff game and think about him and Amon-Ra. I looked at all those Green Bay receivers. Heck, Hollywood Brown just went to Kansas City. To me, I think the need for the dominant corner, like the Niners have 6 corners. They got pretty good depth, and there's good depth in this draft. They could add a couple more corners and have great depth, but depth isn't what they need in my mind at the corner. They need the guy. So
Ronnie Lott was still playing corner, right? Back in 81.
81, but I mean,
Yeah.
Eric Wright was Eric Wright. I mean, Ronnie's Ronnie, but Eric Wright was probably a freak of nature when you think about the size, the speed, the workout ability. And he was there 81, 84 as a true dominator. And he
is Eric Wright the one that runs down Drew Pearson at the end of the championship game after the catch?
Yes. And he's also the one who absolutely put the blanket on either Duper or Clayton in the Stanford Super Bowl and
Super Duper.
84 season. Yeah, I mean, he was awesome. He made picks late in that game. And then the Niners came close with some good corners in between there, but they ultimately had to go get Dion to take away half the field, and they got Eric Davis to play an amazing year. Somebody else says Greg Newsome's available. He wouldn't be bad either, to be honest. But the Cleveland kid from Northwestern.
I don't know that I would love to get him, and I think you can probably get him for a second rounder. I think he fits the bill a lot more. But nice. I also don't think that he's available. They have one more year before they really have to trade him, and you're talking about a team that's also trying to win now. And I know that I've talked about it as well. Really, this whole idea actually came from Marco, and it kind of exploded and got talked about a lot. I love the idea of Newsome. In fact, I stupidly had Newsome graded higher than Surtain coming into that draft. I know it sounds crazy now, but that's how much I like Newsome. I don't think that he's available necessarily either at this point. I think next year he's probably available.
Yeah, also it's tough to like Krug. We spent the full show talking about like corners and how specific their movement skills are in terms of just being able to start in the NFL and just their confidence. That's why a guy like Ambry Thomas keeps getting chances, because even though he has not played well, he just checks certain criteria that corners need to check in the NFL to be able to play on the outside. Guys that have hips and can transition like Newsome, guys that are as big and move the way Surtain does and can play the position technically the way he does, it's just tough to get movement on those players. They're just way too valuable commodities. And, for Newsome, he can be inconsistent at times, but at the end of the day, again, it's not easy in the draft to find guys that move like him.
Yeah.
I agree.
BV wants to know who the 6'7" tight end is you were talking about. Is it Johnson from Penn State?
Johnny Wilson, the wide receiver.
Me? You talking about me?
Yeah. He said Larry.
Mason Pline. His name's Mason Pline. He was a basketball player from Ferris State. Okay. He transfers to play at Furman. He's 6'8". If you watch his basketball highlights, he looks an awful lot like Aaron Gordon, right? He's jamming and he's rising. He's got an above the rim kind of game. Then I went and watched some of his film as a run blocker. For a 6'8" guy, he actually does a decent job of kind of staying in line and keeping the guys in front of him. But then I started reading more about his background. The guy's a mechanical engineering major. Vish knows better than I, but if you're an engineering major at all, you're smart. But if you're a mechanical engineering major, that was the fullback that they had from Oregon State last year, that Jack Coletto. He was a mechanical engineering major, and Juice said that he was the smartest football player he's ever met. This guy's a 6'8". He's 6'8" tight end who can jam he's got real athleticism. He's got 10.5-inch hands, and he's a mechanical engineering major. And he's projected in like the 6th or 7th round. And he's working on he's already got his degree, and he's like working on his master's. The guy and I think tight end, if you want to say, why have tight ends struggled? Why did Latou struggle? Why does Braden Willis struggle? Why did none of these tight ends do anything? Because it takes a level of football intellect to grasp certain positions in this offense, fullback and tight end most specifically. And I think you're going to see Cam Latou this year play far, far better than he played last year, because last year he was so worried about just learning where to be, and he was thinking the game instead of just reacting, and his hands looked awful. His hands are way better than that. He'll play way better this year. But a smart, big tight end who's 6'8" with basketball, hops in the 6th round sounds like a good sleeper to me. I like his name, Mason Pline.
I love the way you tell stories on prospects, the way you set it up. Like I start off like slightly skeptical, and then you throw the name.
Sounds
out
like you wanted to
draft.
then at the end you want to draft him in round 1.
Yeah, and then at the end I'm like, man, this is Jimmy Graham. The Niners are about to steal this guy.
Who is he? Can we get him in 31? Is that too early? I don't.
Yeah, exactly. Mason Pline from.
I like it.
From Furman, through Ferris. So there you go. And you know what? Tight end wise, Brock Bowers is amazing. but he's going to go top 10, and then you go look at a lot of these guys. They worked out Dallin Holker from Colorado State. I don't know. It didn't. Eric All from Iowa, Tip Riemann. I mean, there's guys, but none of them really look all that exciting. But the two guys you got to look at, one is that guy, Mason Pline, Furman. The other guy is Shelton Zion III, who plays for UNLV. Ridiculous athlete. I mean, he's a Georgia kid from Norcross, Georgia, who somehow wound up at UNLV. He's 6'4", 250. And if you look at this kid and his just physical makeup, I mean, this is the exact body type you want for that dominating tight end. And he's also UNLV's Dean's honor list this year. So he's smart and he's got a crazy frame. The production's just okay, but remember that name too, Shelton Zion.
I didn't know you knew some people in the UNLV administrative office to get some academic info on the guy.
Yes, I've done my due diligence on Shelton Zion, and he is an academic honor roll member.
What do you think of Theo Johnson from Penn State? Another 6'6" guy, pretty explosive, 260 pounds.
I mean, he's got, for that size, the thing that stands out about him is that he is a huge guy, right? He's 6'6", 260, but like his footwork was really good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's a Canadian kid. And I didn't watch tons of Theo Johnson, but the guy had a good career. He had 12 career touchdowns, 16th all time in the history of Penn State. He's probably going to be drafted. He was Big Ten honorable mention. He's probably going to be drafted in the mid rounds, like 4th round, 5th round. He was a Mackey Award semifinalist. I mean, he's a pretty good player.
Yeah, that's impressive.
Brother Bob says, I hate doing supers when PP is on, but if we trade Ayuk or Debo, we are not trying to win a Super Bowl this season because a rookie wide receiver or available wide receiver is not as good as Ayuk.
That was Krug's point. That was PP's point.
It's true. It is. That was his point. You guys might be more alike than you think, Brother Bob.
Yeah. Brother Bob might be rescinding that super right now as we speak.
Seriously.
I take that back. I disagree with myself.
Purdy Profit got one there, huh?
Cryptic says we lost to a team and it's worse that they still clutched it out. We need players that can steal souls. Like as Steve Young said, Super Bowls are taken. What happened to George Kittle coming with a vengeance? Ooh.
Oh, the Grim Reaper who steals all the souls, wears number 15, plays
brutal.
for Kansas City, and has a Kermit voice. So
that was so brutal. If you're Kittle and you love to talk and you're talk, you got to be, when you watch the all 22, with the live mic, it just had to make you sick. I mean, the fact that he
was healthy for that game, guys.
You're talking and the guy that you're blocking who's, picks up the fumble and you're talking. I mean, it's a bad look, man.
Oh yeah, I agree there. I'm sure that makes him sick to his stomach, but I don't know how you guys felt about it, but the weirdness with his injury situation before the Super Bowl, I know we don't need to talk about the Super Bowl, but I think that was one of the more underrated things that we didn't discuss after it. Like, he was hurt all week. He didn't necessarily look like George Kittle in the Super Bowl. They kept playing it off like, no, everybody's healthy, they're going to play. I think at this point, we just have to come to understand that George Kittle is going to be healthy between November and December in an NFL season. Between like week 6 and 15, that's when he's going to be healthiest, but he's going to come into the season hurt and he's going to finish the season hurt. Because at this point, it's just like a 4-year sample size of the same thing. And it's like unfortunate, but at the same time, like, he was playing and he was clearly not the same player. He was compromised.
Well, even more of a reason to just absolutely love reworking his contract a second year in a row.
Especially when Jimmy Graham 2.0 is available in the draft and he studied mechanical engineering. Him and the Pasternak can come up with a few algorithms for Shanahan.
They can run this old lemonade stand. Al, I'll do you one better. His desk, it's one of those whiteboard desks. In fact, every time we end, he's got dry erase all over his forearms because he can't keep his arms off his desk, but he's got prospects written down all over that thing.
I heard Kevin does the writing for him.
Oh, does he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I heard he writes down the script.
Yes. He's
And
right
Krueger
here.
goes full Burgundy reading.
He's my
it.
Cyrano de Bergerac from Cal Poly.
I see. Do you read it like Burgundy? In the
Yeah,
Anchorman, you read exactly
exactly.
what's on the teleprompter, exactly what's on the script.
San Diego. It's like a whale's. Oh, no.
Go F yourself, San Diego. Brother Bob says, well, PP said that he would what? To IU?
Listen to IU
for
for certain.
Oh, listen
He
to IU
says,
for certain. No.
I roll, heck no.
Well, that's fine, but
Yeah.
Sertan has greater value than Ayuk.
Yeah,
No
it's
doubt.
that I love Ayuk. That one's not close. Certain is the best corner in football. Ayuk is not the best, second best, or third best wide receiver in football.
Here's a kid that's been picking up a lot of things.
You guys brought up, I'm sorry to interrupt, but you guys brought up Mike Silver. And Silver has been seemingly all over a lot of the free agent stuff with sources and this and that. He has maintained at least half dozen times that the Niners have a big move coming. None of the moves they've made I would categorize as big moves necessarily. I still kind of think that he might be referencing a move that has yet to be consummated.
Oh, I didn't look at it that way, Krug. So I actually interpreted it the opposite. That's interesting to me. That's a good way to look at it because I was interpreting it at they came into free agency with that mindset, and then the way prices worked out, the way Las Vegas, handed out money the way they did to Christian Wilkins, the money Greener got, the money Danielle Hunter got, like just the way contracts were going out, it just felt like it was beyond a price that the 49ers were necessarily looking to pay. And then I also saw that Ian Rappaport thing about how like teams were like forcing the Niners and the Chiefs and these kinds of teams to pay more money to just because they're, feel like they're already really stacked. So that's how I looked at it. Like I looked at it as they were trying to come into this free agency and make a move. And it was just like impossible for them to make it when, 4 years, $110 million is being given to Christian Wilkins, who's an awesome football player. But like the Niners can't compete with 4 years, $110 million.
No, they definitely can't. They definitely can't. All right. Hey, 90 minutes. Not bad for the big show. I feel good about it. I have one more topic. No, I'm just joking. Cosmo, if you're in the chat, that's a shout out to you. I have 0 topics. That basically lands it in. Next week, we will be back on Vish's channel. So make sure you tap in over there. You can see his name right there, Vish Kumaran. Go check out his channel. Subscribe over there. We will be there. Followed by Larry's, and then back here at Last Second Sports. And until next time, peace.